local leadership, i.e. in your own self. You know, and as one friend said to me, for those you said you're, you know, people, young people who are aspiring, they're students. I remember when I was a student, and an elder person said to me, decide what you're not going to do before you're ever faced with the question, right? Have a certain set of ethics that you decide beforehand, because when you're in the space of it, it's so easy to rationalize doing something different. So that's part of just trying to build personal integrity. But you know, one could say that power seems to repeatedly corrupt. I remember President Clinton, when he was leaving office, and the tradition in the United States is that the outgoing president leaves through Andrews Air Force Base. It's a very nice ceremony, and his team will go there and send him off. And I remember President Clinton he was leaving, and he said, "I really wish I could run again." He was a young man, and I'll never ever forget that. You know, so it's not unique to leaders on the African continent. I think it's a universal principle.
Thank you very much. Can we have 3 more? And this time I'm going to be kind of biased towards my lady friends. One over there, a second one over here, and maybe we'll spice it up with the third one. Okay. So 1, 2, and 3. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Lydia Hagan. I want to find out from you, in your opinion, what practical measures do you think Africa needs for conflict prevention? And for these measures, what practical measures? We've heard a lot of theories. What practical measures do we need in Africa? And how involved are women in these measures? Thank you.
This, maybe then let Nala, yes, over there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The name is Sanjeev. I'm wondering whether the questions are limited to only conflict in Africa, because the issue is conflicts. Now, my problem is that of perception. There is a perception that there is a certain level of double standards in the world with regard to conflict. We have a situation where the AU have refused to sanction the ICC's position on the president of Sudan. Now, what we see as double standard is that whereas you have a president who is trying to maintain the sovereignty of his country against internal people who are rebels, or whatever you call them, he is being indicted and is being a warrant has been issued for his arrest. By the same token, you have Israel on the other side. Israel attacked Lebanon and went in seriously. Israel again has attacked Palestinians, and it has been acclaimed all over the world that war crimes have been inflicted on them, and we have a situation of living phosphorus for the economy. And yet, the ICC has said very little, nothing at all, in the face of this situation, where we know that Israel has been, we know that the Palestinians have made their mistakes, but where the ICC intervenes and insists on warrants for one, and no warrants, no even comment on the other. I think it's a big war. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sena Gabriel. I have the conflicts that we're talking about when it comes to elections. One of the institutions we now have, which we're all very proud of, the radio, as we're all very happy that we have 140 or something stations, and everybody can talk, civil society doing its best. But that's the same instrument which can be the source of conflict. if enough rabble-rousing goes on there, and they're able to call people to action. I don't know. I'm just raising it as an issue because I think no one wants to do away with this democratic governance that we have on the airwaves, but they also can be the source of the conflict, and I'm just raising it as an issue. Thank you.
Then Dr. do justice to.
My name is Bashir, a student of politics. Well, somebody says political science itself. It just dawned on me that conflicts have been so much part of African elections that I have even forgotten that elections are actually meant to resolve conflict. Doctor, since you say you were part of our elections here, last elections, then you may perhaps agree with me that all is well with Ghana but elections. But I want to know whether you agree with some other person, which is Professor Ali Mazrui of Kenya, who says that elections are alien to Africa and that they have failed to live up to African realities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I very much like all of these questions. I think they're really good for our discussion. Practical measures for conflict prevention. I thought I mentioned some, but the one that I think about the most, and maybe this is conflict prevention, conflict response, and I'll keep harping on it, which is the need for sub-regional capacity building. The process now is the AU standby brigades, and I don't think anything is a silver bullet. I want to be very clear about that. So they're not going to stop, all conflicts, and they're not going to prevent all conflicts. But when you look at the institutional environment, the global institutional environment for preventing and ending violence, there's a level missing. Many of the conflicts that I dealt with are on an African continent. The UN simply can't get there fast enough. We saw this in Liberia. I guess it was in 2019. When was it? My mind is. What was it? The Ghana brokered the peace deal. That was in 2003, right? 2003, I believe it was. And we all knew that there needed to be some type of peacekeeping operation, with the three parties that, the government, the MODEL, and the other one. These rebel groups basically are going into this interim government. Eventually, the Nigerians had to deploy first. And then it was actually followed by American troops. And then we started pulling peacekeepers out of Sierra Leone to go into Liberia. But it took much longer for the UN to be able to mobilize itself, get troop contributing countries, get the resolutions in place to be able to respond. So the UN, we saw the same thing in Burundi. The South Africans, the Ethiopians, and the Mozambicans actually went in a conflict prevention approach. Everyone was very, very nervous about the possibility of a repeat genocide. This is back in early 2000, in the 2000s, 2001, 2002. And the South Africans went in nominally to do VIP protection for returning opposition, so that they could be in Bujumbura and feel safe about returning as part of a peace process. But they were also there to protect the airport in case other peacekeepers needed to come in, and they, with the Ethiopians and the Mozambiques, supported stability until the UN could then come in and rehab them. And so, you see the same thing in Darfur with the AU forces who deployed first, and then only the UN came in afterwards. And so what I'm saying is we need regular mechanisms for the deployment of these regional peacekeepers and the financing of them. Normally we do it by voluntary contributions with the United States and the UK and France, basically us three with some others, a few others, picking up the money on an ad hoc base. Whereas if you actually use Chapter 8, you get the legitimacy and you also get the resources that are necessary. So that would be at the regional level, which I think is very important to deal with violence at the national level. But I'm also arguing that take the election process. It's widely accepted now across Africa that you're going to have local monitors, international monitors, regional monitors, and local monitors. Use that fact to try to get those monitors to play a conflict prevention role. I don't want to overburden the monitors. I don't want to overburden elections. They can't solve every problem. But I think that I always say start where you are. And start with those, work very consciously with the with the local election observers. So those I think are two practical steps that can be taken to help prevent conflict. Who refers, this question about a double standard is women, and thank you. What role would women play? Well, when I again, just back to my point, when I've observed those elections, the people who stay the longest are the women, right? I mean, they're there from, the way I like to observe elections, I may jump to a few spots, but then I like to stay at a polling station and just watch the dynamic at that polling station. And I have been very impressed with the commitment of those observers who will sit there, not take breakfast, not take lunch, maybe have some water for dinner, well into midnight, 1 a.m., using lanterns, trying to make sure that those votes are counted properly and taken care of. And so, and a lot of times those are women. Very clearly, women are having great strides in terms of contesting for parliamentary seats as well. So women members of parliament are actively involved in policy making and the decision-making process of a country. So I think that women can play a role at every single level, the community level, at the national level as MPs, and certainly to even contest elections as presidents. So they have an integral role. I do know that I am the first woman giving this lecture. Congratulate you. Thank you. The double standards on the ICC, I think that this is quite well known, that the process of selecting cases, it could be politicized. Right? I mean, to put it that way. In the case of Darfur, I believe that the ICC, the case was referred to the ICC by the UN Security Council. And just to put some insight, I believe that the French were challenging the United States because under the Bush administration, the perception was that the United States was against the ICC, yet the United States had called the situation in Darfur genocide. And so they were testing our principles. and we allowed the case to go forward. We did not veto it. And so there is a political element very clearly in this process of which cases appear before the ICC, which is why I think it's extremely important to build obviously national courts, because the other principle of the ICC is that if the national courts can take the case, then the national court should take the case before referring it to the ICC. So building that national capacity, but so that one doesn't feel that this is, all of the cases before the ICC right now are African. All of them. And so then what's going on? Is it only Africans that are war criminals, right? No, of course not. Right? So why are all the cases of Africans? And so to get away from that perception and the reality of it right now is to build that regional, the International Court for Human Rights and Justice, the regional courts in Africa, I think. And that's partly what President Mbeki is trying to do in Sudan with the hybrid court that follows from the model that was successful with the Special Court for Sierra Leone. So I take your point. Yes, absolutely, democracy, where you have democratic airways, they can also be used as instruments for ethnic mobilization and violence. It's very, very clear. This is exactly what we saw in Kenya, only the reverse. In Kenya, you had vernacular radio where they were, in the local language, they had coded messages which were going out, right? It wasn't as crude as in Rwanda, where they were just calling people, dehumanizing people, or dehumanizing ethnic groups. In Kenya, there were certain code words that only people from that community understood what that meant, right? And so, vernacular radio was used as a hate instrument and as an instrument for mobilizing violence and what I call ethnic cleansing, particularly in the Rift Valley, but not just there. On the other hand, it was Kenyan civil society and media that launched the campaign of Save Our Beloved Country and turned the dynamic around. And so it's just an instrument, and it can be used in different ways. And so that's where a transformation of the culture, where if people say, if you're a politician trying to get my vote and you support violence as a means, I will never vote for you, right? And if the communities can start holding leadership accountable for, you cannot cross that line, that's going too far. I think that we will get someplace because the radio can be used either way. One thing about it, though, I would say overwhelmingly, the liberalization of media has helped to prevent people from using ethnic mobilization because the radio crosses all communities, and so it's harder to keep people isolated in a small mentality. And so I think overwhelmingly the media has been positive for democracy. I would say elections are meant to resolve conflict in the long run. That's the way I would put it. I agree with Ali Mazrui, which is why I said Africa has a right to its own history. But I disagree with him because I think that African realities today is that there is a consensus across the continent about the legitimacy of elections as a means to change leadership. Because ultimately, I don't think I think that is what elections are about. Elections should not have the burden of democracy. There are many, many more aspects, as you know, to achieve democracy and to achieve good governance. Elections are particularly there for leadership change, right? And they can have all kinds of other positive ramifications, but it's a leadership change mechanism. And I think in the short term, navigating that with quote-unquote African realities is important. Over the long term, I think that it probably does help to stabilize a system and allow for the institutional development. And again, a differentiated institutional development, so it doesn't have to follow the model of the United States, because the United States doesn't follow the model of the United States, right? The United States' electoral system is an idealized electoral system. When we talk about bribing voters, I know that they pass out cigarettes some places to get votes, right? I mean, all of these things happen there just like everywhere else. It's just that the institutions are able to manage all of that messiness that comes with elections.
Lovely. I think we can do with 3 more questions. My time is 7:15. So let's see. I can see a gentleman I know very well by name Sheshe. And there's a fine gentleman here in uniform. I think he can represent one of the institutions that we have. And then let me see the gentleman over there. I hope it's not the faces.
Thank you. You say that, I think that a key part of your presentation has been building institutions. Sorry, my name is Abutuama. It's building institutions. And my question is, how do you deal with that challenge when the main political actors and the parties are interested in coaching up. And they are the ones who are in the lead in the building of institutions. How do you deal with that contradiction? Then second question.
You know I'm quite strict about
I'm trying to stay through.
No, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Boy, Director for Operations, Ghana Police Service. I think when it comes to the role for prevention of conflicts during elections, I think it's the police, or let me even put it, the security institutions that play the leading role. We are confronted, maybe even after the elections, we are humiliated because of merely enforcing the rules of the game, for which before the action might have met all stakeholders. As we are sitting down here, we are introducing ourselves. Say, academia. A student of what? Political science. That. Now the question I want to ask is that, after we have come to listen to the lectures and we get back, how do we disseminate the information? Because the people who spark these conflicts are the supporters and the people who do not have the privilege of sitting with us here. Does it mean that after having listened to this fine thing and we get back, we do not interact with our people? And for that matter, when it comes to elections, things spark and then we go back to square one. This is what I want to know, what we will be able to do in order to let our people understand this issue, so far as they do not have the privilege to be with us and listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There's a gentleman just behind there. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Makachisto, Minister of Ghana, Political Science State. My question is, in Ghana, you know, chiefs are not supposed to involve themselves in politics. But here being the case, most of the conflicts that arise are identity relation conflicts, of which the politicians go to the grassroots, to the chiefs, to solicit for their support. And these chiefs sometimes openly in public declare their support. Some are starting to be corrected. And it ends up, especially after the election, DC elections, when a chief does not give his support, meaning DC is not going to be, his post is not going to be accepted. So how do we reconcile the chieftaincy institution with that of the political politicians, their rule, as even the constitution is more or less, they are not permitted? Thank you.
I'll take the last one over there as the last one of this round, please. Don't you worry.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Fraser, I'm Samuel from Ghana Statistical Service. Thank you all for the please. My problem is the influence of Western countries who have same ideology with other African leaders. I'm trying to refer to those, we have this capitalism, we have socialist party, and we have the capitalist party. And in Ghana, we have the same thing. And we have this Western countries trying to influence these Western African countries to actually be in power so that they can liaise with them in order to achieve the same goals. So how can we prevent this influence going on? And this last one is, I want to base it on the use of abusive words by politicians during political campaigns and other things on radio, which normally send fires to various homes and cause confusion among parents and even their children. How can we prevent this? Thank you very much.
We will listen to this, and then after that, I have another round.
The temperature is rising. So I would welcome anyone who also has views on some of these questions to please, contribute. I don't have all the answers here. The question about the main political actors and the parties are only interested in capturing power, but yet we're talking about building institutions. They don't have an interest, essentially, to build those institutions. I think it's a little more complicated because I do think that you can see that I have a view about politicians, a perspective, and I do agree that they are primarily interested in capturing power, maybe because they have plans and policies that they believe would be better, that would serve the society better. I do think that they, like power as well. But I think that, the work is going on. I mean, they have multiple interests and varied interests. And so it's not just about power all the time, every time. And I'll just mention, for instance, in terms of building institutions, and I'll go to CDD Ghana because we're here with them. They have been working with Ghana's parliament, to help mobilize civil society input into the review and drafting of bills. And so that's one way in which the civil society itself plays a key role in establishing its institutions, and it's not just in the hands of the politicians or the political parties. So strengthening civil society engagement and work is important. CDD Ghana has also helped to collaborate with, anti-corruption commissions on human rights and administrative justice. And so, my answer